Zdravstvuyte. Prijetnova požalovat na SpringBoot under the hood. Now we'll stop, because otherwise you will all laugh. Just to start with a little joke, who knows this little character here? The Duke, yeah? And why is he wearing this funny symbol? I made the presentation first for the Croatian user group for Javantura. And you know how is there a group called the Java user group in Croatia? Hujak. So I made the slide Hujak. So for those that don't know about me, I'm Nicolas Fränkel. I'm a developer, software solution architect, what have you. Mainly my background is in Java. I've always worked in the consulting business for 15 years. I dabble in JavaScript because sometimes I must. And recently I became interested into Kotlin. So I'm working for Hybris. Hybris is a nice company that was bought by SAP. We create an e-commerce platform. If you're interested, you can look at it. It's based on Spring and Java, obviously. Now to the meat. Who knows about the Spring framework? Okay, easier. Who doesn't know about the Spring framework? And the rest of people? Still sleeping from the lunch? Okay, so the Spring framework is a super great framework. I've used it for many, many years. However, basically, every time I had to create a new project for when kickstarting something, it takes me some days, like 1 or 2, to create a nice POM, and I don't want anyone to touch it before I did the stuff. Really, between 1 or 2 days, depending on the project, the size and stuff. And Phil Webb, who is part of the pivotal team, describes SpringBoots as a nice ingredients, and then you make your own cake. Now, SpringBoots is about the cake that is already made. And that's super great. Who is already a SpringBoot user? Nearly everyone. Great. And basically, SpringBoot is magical. SpringBoot is magical because, well, you add one dependency in your POM, like here, for example. Last year, I made a talk about the actuator, SpringBoot's actuator, that gives you a lot of nice stuff about SpringBoot. So you add one dependency, and then you've got one endpoint magically appearing that gives you the status of your application. You've got metrics. If you didn't attend my talk last year, it's recorded, you can look at it. So, one dependency and you've got that. And so that's super valuable. That's out of the box. And the thing is that SpringBoot works very well until, well, doesn't work so well. You don't know why. SpringBoot is magical. And I don't like to do everything myself, but I don't like magic either. I want to understand what happens under the hood, under the cover. Also, you might want to understand why it works like so, because you want to change the default behavior. And at that point, you have to understand how it works. You cannot rely on the magic. And so that's what I did. So for example, let's take a simple configuration. Here you can see I've added 2 dependencies. The first dependency is obviously Spring Data GPA. The second is a database runtime, because I'm lazy and I don't want to use an install database. So how does it work? Let's check. We can see that SpringBoot starter data GPA relies on one dependency. This is called SpringBoot starter. And in turn, SpringBoot starter relies on 2 different jars. SpringBoot autoconfigure.jar and SpringBoot.jar. Let's look at the first one. SpringBoot autoconfigure.jar. How is the structure? You see that there is a very well-known and standardized meta-inf folder for metadata. And in this one, there is one that is of particular interest, is the spring.factories. Who knows about spring.factories? One guy. That's good. You are in the right location. For the others. For you, I'm sorry. Let's look at the Spring factories. So the Spring factories, yeah, it's a little small, but don't worry. There are a lot of key values pair. And if you analyze them, you will see one is called enable auto configuration. And inside, there is one list of many, many, many different auto configurations that might be or might not be part of your path. In that case, since I've added the Spring Data GPA, this GPA repository's auto configuration is inside of it. Let's have a look at it. So it's an annotation. And for you who's already used SpringBoots, there is an add configuration clause. And I'm stupid because that's already part of Spring. So there is an add configuration. So this class is super easy to understand. It's a configuration class. However, it's empty. Blin. Now, why is it empty? Because it imports another class. And if you look at import, there is GPR repositories autoconfigure registrar.class. This is where the magic, the configuration really happens. Now, on this class, there are a couple of interesting annotations. Conditional on bean, conditional on class, conditional on missing bean, conditional on property, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, you have a lot of conditional stuff. They are summed up here. And the Spring team is famous for having interesting names, like really, really long names, but descriptive one. So probably conditional means something. Who knows about the profile annotation? Half the room, probably. OK, great. And this is what the profile annotation looked like. Basically, super simple. You have an interface defined called profile and value, which is an array of string. So that lets you create beans only if this profile is active. If you check in the current source codes, it has been changed. It does exactly the same. It does exactly the same. But it uses another semantics. It uses the add conditional depending on a condition class. How does it work? Basically, the conditional points to a condition. Condition is an interface. It has one single method called matches. And as we can see, profile condition is a direct subclass of that. And then there is another subclass or implementation class called SpringBoot condition. And you find this kind of annotation, or at least it's children a lot in SpringBoots. And basically, it's super simple. It enables calling a bean annotated method when the condition matches. If the condition does not match, nothing. Now, I've talked enough. Let's have a simple demo. I think this is the right one. Yes, so here. So I've created, first I show you something. Here, I was not sure about the network, so I initialized everything. So here, you go to start.spring.io, and you can choose your stuff, create your group, demo, artifact, whatever, then you generate. Who knows about this? 2/3 of the room. That's great. For those who don't, that's super helpful, because it lets you pick and choose in a graphical way. I think there is even a telnet interface. Now, if you want to be even more lazy, then you call it like that, and you can already have your group and artifact ID already filled in. And as I said, I really love Kotlin, so you can also do that, and it will be with Kotlin. So you can already have your own pre-filled URL. Yeah, it's super lazy. I love it. Now, use it because it gets you a lot of stuff for free. Like, for example, now there is a Maven wrapper. Who knows about the Maven wrapper? 10%, 20, 15%? Okay. So for those who don't, the Maven wrapper is super important because the Maven has a big problem. Basically, if you use Maven today, you have no clue whether the same POM will have the same results in the Maven version in 2 years. There might be some changes, non-compatible changes, breaking changes. And before, Gradle has one advantage of a Maven, that you could add the version of Gradle into your source control management, and there was a little strapper, a wrapper that would download the right version for you. So you would always have the same version, preventing non-breaking changes. And this is super important. And now you've got the Maven wrapper in SpringBoot as well by default. So you should use it. It's super important. So you generate the project, you got it, it's a zip archive, and then you use it like that. So I didn't lie. Here you see Maven wrapper, Maven command. So one is for Linux, obviously, the other for Windows. It works. The POM is super easy. I didn't change anything. It's the default one. So now I will create a bean, public string, oh, sorry. And I will say system return hello jeeconf. And I just want to be sure that this method gets called. So I will system.out.println. So it's here. Method was called. So far, so good. So I told you about conditional. Let's try some condition. Condition on class. So I want this method to be called only if a class is not present on the class path. Like I will say, if java.lang.string is not present, then I don't want this method to be called. So nothing. Now, if I do the same with foo, obviously, this will work. So super easy stuff. So you can do your own like that. Likewise, I can add the conditional on class and say, I want this method called if there is something called java.lang.string in the class path. And guess what? It exists. So this method will be called. Good? Good. No question? Let's go further. And so you have a lot of those conditions. And those conditions are not only limited to the presence of a class or the absence of a class, but you also can have the presence of a bean, presence on a Java version, Java, whether it's a web application or not, if a property exists. You have a lot of those. And you also can create your own. And if a simple conditional is not enough, then you can compose your own condition. Then you can apply Boolean logic. I think now we can create our own starter. So you do the same. you don't know the project, and you create this kind of stuff. And it's done. So in this presentation, I will use Xstream. Who knows about Xstream, the serialization framework? Yeah, that's not only for old people. Yeah, sorry for that, guys. So before Jackson, when we were still using XML, it was super hard to use JAXB because JAXB is more about making also something conform to the class. And sometimes you just want something super fast and super efficient. And the people at ThoughtWorks created a framework called Xstream that in a few lines of code, you can serialize your stuff according to your needs. So what I will do here is I will add Xstream to show you how it works first. Version is mandatory. So I will create a bean, and I will create a command line runner. Who knows the command line runner stuff? Great, 10%. Command line runner is super great because it lets you just run arbitrary codes at the starting of your application context. So I will return a new command line runner. So for demos, it's superb. And since I'm using Java 8, I will be super smart. Yeah, great. So now what will I do? I will create a new Xstream. And I will create, I want it to XML. So for that, I need a class. So I will create a public static class person, which has public final string first name, and I will do the same with the last name. And I will add constructor parameters, add both, and this is my class. So now I say new person, and I will say John Doe. Obviously, I need to put that in a string, and then I will write it there. So this is just to show you how it works. It's not super important, but now you know about Xstream. So that's Xstream. Super fast, quick, nice. OK? That's great. Now, I told you that something exists. There is a dependency. There is an annotation on SpringBoot that lets you create something if it doesn't exist. Because basically, this Xstream, it has no state. It does nothing. It's meant to be a singleton. And there is no use that I created in every one of my method, or even if I'm my application. So what I did is I create the Xstream dependency, and I add the file we talked about. I add a Spring factory. So I use the key enable auto configuration because this key is super important. And it points to my auto configuration class. And this auto configuration is just empty for now. So far, I did nothing. I created just a start. But in my next iteration, I add the conditional on missing bean Xstream. So what does that mean? That means the following. First, I will add this. into my dependency. Now I will create a bean for extreme. I want to use something like JSON, hierarchy stream driver, there. And I want to put it, to inject it there. And I'm allowed to, because, yeah, it will be injected directly for me. So here, what should happen? Still digesting. So right now, what I did is I created an extreme instance, and I tell it to use JSON stuff. So it uses JSON stuff, for sure. Still, nothing mind-blowing. I mean, it's basic. However, now, if I remove this method, what will happen? Because I have no extreme instance available. And that's the magic of SpringBoots. Basically, because I have a dependency on a jar that has a Spring Factory file with the enable auto configuration key pointing to a configuration class that creates a bean, then in this configuration file, everything will be part of my application context. And I don't need every time to do the same, to create new instances. So that's super cool. No, you don't seem to be super cool. OK, let's go further. Basically, here I used one simple, stupid stuff to XML. What I want now is I will create a converter. I will tell Extreme how I want the stuff to be converted. So I will create a public static class converter, person converter. I want it to be a person converter. And it implements converter. So again, it's Extreme API. I don't want to go into the details. But basically, I want to tell it that if the type is person, then it can convert it. And here I will say how it is to be marshaled. So I will have to, basically it's old stuff. So you need to do a lot of casting because it's not generic. I will say that this is a person, and I will say writer, dot set value, person, dot first name. So I want everything into one node, last name. And I will register that. So here, when I receive extreme, I say extreme dot register converter new person converter. Yep. So you see here I have 2 lines, and here normally I should have only 1. It works. John, do. Okay, so again, it's customization. Because my problem now is I want to provide the extreme stuff to the application context, but I don't want people to every time called extreme register converter. I want it to be automatic. I want it that when the application context has any converter in it, I want them register automatically, because probably there would be good defaults. Good, let's do that. Well, I already did, so I'm lazy. I will just check out. So what I do now is when there is a converter and there is an extreme, I will take the collection of converters, and for each of them, I will register them. So super simple stuff. Again. The only deed that I need to do now, I will need to remove that and put it in its own method. I will say that it's a bean, and I don't need to do it here anymore. Yeah, here also. I will just upgrade the version with what I've just created. And how the converter gets registered automatically. So this is the magic behind SpringBoot. There is nothing magical. I mean, it's completely stupid. But with a good usage of this kind of stuff, it makes you do real magic. Now you are not, it's not mandatory to create your new extreme instance. It's not mandatory to create your new converters. And think about it. That's exactly what they do when you have a data source. Basically, what they do when you have your own data source is they don't create the in-memory data source, and they use it. Now, if you create your own, there will be an unconditional missing bean that say, if there is no bean called data source, then create this one. So I was a little quick because I thought there would be more questions. Now is a good time, however. So here is my blog, here is my Twitter, here you can be my friend on LinkedIn, but more importantly, the last line, you can find the starter code. So you can already start hacking right now. Sorry for the picture. Look. Again, please, please. But yeah, that's nice that you take pictures. Should I? Normally, the slides will be available, and I tweet them always anyway. So at this time, do you have any questions? Tibier, boudier de pipiettes. Все хорошо. No questions, guys. So that's because it was super clear and I'm super great. Oh, thanks, guys. So, super magic. Okay, who still thinks that this is magic? No, come on, guys, hey. Afterwards, you will tell me there is a little gremlin moving the 0 and the 1 inside the computer. No, that is super great. I mean, it is so simple. The Spring engineers are really, really good because they make something so simple for you to use. It's very hard to make something simple. And they really achieve it. Now, it's so simple that when you don't know about this kind of stuff, you think, wow, that's magic. There is no magic involved. Now, I hope that you are ready to get started with your own Spring starters. And even if you don't want to go this way because you don't have the needs, you can understand why and how it works. And if something doesn't work the way you want, you can look where you should probably customize the stuff. So if there are no more questions, thank you very much.